It's going.
I'd like to welcome everyone today. For those that are on with us, we want you to be very engaging. So I'm looking forward to your questions to our guest speaker today. Those of you that are tuning into this, obviously you cannot ask Sam live. I encourage your questions and you can email us. So for those of you that are have this recorded and you're watching it, take notes along the way, and anything you have questions about, we will be glad to work with Sam on answers. So just an update there as we move forward. For the rest of you, please feel free to be engaging. We look forward to that. You'll be on camera, if you will, or recorded. So hopefully just be aware of that, but we are looking forward to the work. I want to start, basically, I'm going to probably, for those of you that have been on, our loyal followers that are on just about every week, I hesitate. I don't want to bore you. Okay, I need someone else who's sharing their screen. Is that you, Sam? I'm gonna.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna bump you off for a second. I just want to point out, are you seeing the tech page, the tech commercialization webpage?
Yes.
Okay, my screen sometimes does this where I don't get to know that I'm watching it. So basically just reiterating that what we're doing, that we are part of the America's SBDC Kansas statewide website at kansassbdc.net. And when you land there, you can go to the tech commercialization page. This is still a work in process. We are trying to continue to move forward with it. We're going to have our tech lunch and learns. The format may be a little different than this, but we will start posting our lunch and learns ahead of time as we know the content. And there will be a new or update of upcoming lunch and learns. We are also going to have our history, our library of lunch and learns in here. As we start moving forward, placing those here, we'd love to get some feedback from you. If it's easy to navigate, if it's confusing, if you got to where you're looking to go. The same thing with our with the Bright Center. I think we're going to move the Bright Center curriculum inside the Lunch and Learn or the Tech Lunch and Learn because we're going to post the NASA Primes website, or the NASA Primes web page for us will be in one of these buttons here to where you can get to it for those that are working with us easily. Point being, we're trying to make this a living toolbox so you can get there, whether you're a SBDC in another state or you're in an SBDC within the state of Kansas as a tech advisor, business advisor, or you're a resource partner, or you're an individual client. We want to make this work for you, including like today's program. We will put that in here. We are going to add the PowerPoint program, contact information, and steps, doing things to try to make these much more productive for you. So we want to continue to reiterate that as we move forward. So please go look through it when you get a few minutes, maybe early in the morning when you're grabbing a cup of coffee and you're still kind of waiting for the day to start driving you crazy. We've talked about the tech commercialization steps and other things like that. So just a reminder of what we're doing to try to make our tool chest available to everyone. With that in mind, we've got today, we've got Rick Slater still working with us from our NASA Primes. He's also helping us with our ways of funding. We called it sole source contracting. We called it agile acquisition, I think is what Lori Moncrief calls it. So it's a part of the commercialization opportunities beyond encountering innovation is the way I want to describe it, to where you realize that Encountering innovation is the beginning of the programs we've done to attract you, to help assess you, to prep you for the Tech Scouts. So what happens after that? And that's a lot of the work that we're doing in the few weeks past and the weeks moving forward. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Rick. And I think, Sam, you can share your screen now and let Rick begin. Thank you.
Okay, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy that we've got Sam Riehn as a guest speaker today. And to introduce Sam, he's the CEO of the SBIR Advisors, Inc. He's also the Director of Business Development for Pathfinder Solutions Group, venture partner for the Stony Lonesome Group, and a venture partner for the Ridgeline Partners. Sam worked for 7 years as a CO for the U.S. Air Force, serving as a contracting officer under the AFSOC and Offensive Cyber Operations. He's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, received his MBA from Eastern New Mexico University, and has helped over 150 companies win SBIR, STTR awards. So with that, welcome, Sam. Why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate the introduction there, and apologize for the hat. I know it's not the most professional thing, but it's way better looking than what's underneath it, I promise, today. So, I'm excited for today's talk. We had a great call yesterday with Alan and Rick and I, and where we had planned on I was going to take this was, let's talk about SBIR from a high level. And Alan and Rick said, this audience has already heard this. Let's get into the juicy stuff. And so I'm really excited I was excited to hear that. And I said, all right, let's do it. So we're going to kind of talk about real quick, more about what we do, but then jump into how we see the world and how we're approaching. So basically, SBIR Advisors, Inc. I'm founder of this company. We're a team of 20 former contracting officers like myself. And what we all came from a background of cyber and space. And so we've got a little bit of software, AI, ML in there too, acquisitions. But what we were seeing from those two programs, I guess, or categories, is a lot of that is classified. So my whole team has clearances. We came from top secret world on the Air Force Army side, but what we were seeing behind that door frankly scared us. Like, we're in a bit of a cold war right now with some near peer competitors, and all the war fighting that's happening is in acquisitions, and we're losing this war a little bit in that our acquisition processes are so slow as a DoD that we're falling behind, and to our near peer competitors and our commercial partners who are just innovating so fast that we're having trouble keeping up. And it's not that American technology companies aren't keeping up. It's not that the DoD warfighters aren't keeping up. It's that acquisition is not keeping up with what's new and what's out there and awarding contracts fast enough to innovative companies that were kind of stuck in our old traditional ways. And we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. But that's a problem, right? So if we don't correct that soon, we could be disrupted in the next war, and we definitely don't want that to happen, because disruption in the commercial sense in industry means that you've gotten kind of you've rested on your laurels too long, and an innovative startup has popped up and did what you're doing better and faster, and now they're going to steal all your business. It does not mean that in the defense space. When you get disrupted in a war, it spells really bad things. So we all have the mission to change that. And while we were in, we did as much as we could to push on rapid acquisitions and speed up acquisitions on that side. There's almost only so much you can do without becoming a colonel and general and things like that. And we weren't going to wait 10 years to do that. So we all are exited the Air Force and are trying to help the DoD from this side help the Air Force get out of its own way and influence DoD acquisitions from the commercial side. So what that means is we work with venture capital. There's a number of different VCs. Rick mentioned a few that I'm a venture partner for, but there's 8 total VCs that we work with. They're all national security focused. And so we're helping their portfolio companies do business with the DoD and grow their business inside the Air Force, Army, and intelligence communities. So, part of what we do there is a lot of these companies, these startups, don't know how to spell DoD. They come to these VCs from Silicon Valley and whatnot, and the Department of Defense is a giant black box to them, but they have really interesting technologies that we know could be applicable to the intelligence communities or to defense. And so part of what we do is come in and help consult them through the process and hold their hand and show them how to do all the registrations and get all the way ready to do business with DoD. Then we help on the proposal end and some of the contracting stuff. But a lot of what we do is business development, connecting them to the right people within the Department of Defense, letting them know what are the program offices, who are the customers who would be likely end users of your solution. And that's what we're focused on. And we've been pretty successful at it, but I wanted to just, frame it. That's what we do. Now let's talk about kind of how we see the world. So what we see is that there's typically 2 types of companies that we interact with, that we see on a day-to-day basis. That's everyone's dual use, right? They have a solution that could work on both the defense side and the commercial side. Sometimes they don't know that it could work on the defense side, but a lot of the technology we're seeing has application within the Air Force or Army, because those are really just large enterprise. I mean, a lot of people think Air Force is just pointy objects and blow stuff up, but really they have a school system, they have a whole medical infrastructure behind them. They have HR, they have all the things that you would see on a private, maybe if you went into a town, everything that town is doing, we're doing on an Air Force base. So a lot of the target customers that for commercial have applicability on the DoD and might have a DoD version of that potential customer on the military side. So dual use, meaning that they can apply to both, but companies kind of come in at 2 different flavors. So they say, hey, I recognize I have a dual use technology, and some of them position themselves as government first. So Enduro is one of the early ones that we worked with. Haven't worked with SpaceX or Palantir, but they're all on the same kind of boat here. So these are companies that have a dual use product, but their business plan is to target the government market and go public sector. And so what they often look to do is become prime contractors themselves, do a lot of this business development direct, go and talk to the program offices, the executive officers who they know would be interested in their solution. They're trying to push their program or their solutions into programs of record. They also often have heavy services wrap. So these are not companies that just want to sell and push licenses. These are companies that want to come in and help do services to integrate their solution with the DoD. And be partners with them. And sometimes, they might partner with a Deloitte or a McKinsey or something like that to provide the actual consulting services to help with that integration. But almost every contract we see from this group is they're trying to come in with not just a product or a solution, but also all of the infrastructure and support behind it to help the DoD use that solution. So that's typically what we see on government first. On dual use, commercial first. So these are companies that need to take like a real good look at why they're going into the DoD. And these are companies that we're often trying to convince, hey, DoD needs your product, please come work with them. And they're not necessarily motivated to come work with DoD. They've heard they're making buku dollars on the commercial side, or they've heard the DoD is really hard to work with. They've got maybe some customers in foreign countries. So they're not necessarily interested in going defense. And it might be for various reasons. Could be like they're pacifists, so they and that, or they're just, like I said, making too much money on commercial side to care and to invest in DoD. So with these guys, their approach is often to partner with resellers, integrators, think like Carosoft, Thundercat, things like that. So they come in and they don't try to sell directly to the DoD. Instead, they just try to have a bunch of commercial contracts with resellers who will then go and to various degrees of exclusivity sell within the government. There's almost no services wrap. They don't make any margin on that. So they're usually just pushing product licenses, that kind of thing. And like I said, they're not doing direct business development. So they're hiring firms like us or other channel partners to actually go out and push their product. And so how does this all fit in what I call the traditional model? And how are we disrupting this model of acquisition? So these are really at a high level, these are the tools that a contracting officer has available to them to spend their budgets every year. And say a program office will pretty much, these are estimates, but this is kind of how I've broken this into. You've got your different options for contract vehicles at a high level. I've put down an estimate about how long it takes from idea to award for the state, to the time someone identifies a requirement to the time that contract is awarded. What does it look like as far as an acquisition schedule? And then how much of a program office's budget is spent on these different vehicles? So here's the problem with traditional paths, right? If they want to go open competition, they want to post it somewhere publicly and open it up for anybody to propose to, they're going to get a ton of proposals. Oftentimes they'll get protested as well. And so that extends the time it takes for an acquisition to happen. So on average, 9 to 12 months is what you're looking at if you want to post something publicly and go open competition. So they're thinking about those acquisitions probably a year or two out. They're forecasting that budget to Congress to get that money approved. And so by the time, in other words, unless you were on their radar 2 years ago, they don't have money for you today. Everything's already tied up, has a name, and it's going to things like this. So they're saying this portion of the budget has to be set aside for this acquisition that is going to take a year to execute. Now, that's really slow, and they recognize that. So they try to create these other vehicles that speed things up a little bit. So like IDIQs, BPAs, like blanket purchase agreements. IDIQ is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. These are basically, we call these contract vehicles that they stand up internally. So I'll take it out of my former office, for example. So like cyber office.
Hey, Sam.
Go ahead, Alan.
Sam, just a second. Are you flipping your slide? I think you're on your third slide or your second slide.
Yep, still looking at the IDIQ and Mac vehicle here.
Yeah, we're not seeing that, or I'm not. Are we missing it, or am I missing it?
Do you see open competition as the top line here?
I'm seeing it okay, Alan. Maybe
Okay,
it's
all right. It's
Okay.
just it's my other screen then. Okay, I just double checking. Thanks.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm seeing it okay as well.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, cool. So what a contracting officer tries to do when they set up these contract vehicles is they try to limit competition. So they say it takes way too long to go out full and open. So let's limit it a little bit. Let's instead compete a contract like an IDIQ and pick a group of vendors who would be able to, provide the solutions within a certain category. So like I was saying, my former office was offensive, defensive, cyber. So we would set up what we call a cyber IDIQ and publish that out onto full and open competition and say, okay, anyone with cyber services or cyber products, we want you to bid on this contract and join our catalog. And we would get, hundreds of proposals, and we down select maybe 30 companies. And we say, okay, these are the 30 companies that if we ever have any cyber requirements, we're going to go to them and we're going to publish that opportunity to an IDIQ or BPA or whatever the internal contract is. That's option number 2 here. So these are little catalogs that unless you're on that catalog, you're on that IDIQ, you're not seeing the requirements that are coming from that office. Only those IDIQ holders are seeing those requirements and are therefore winning that business. And these IDIQs only come up every 5 years or so. Well, unfortunately, this is where 90% of most program office budgets go, is to these internal, owned acquisition vehicles that they have. And so what that means are people that are companies that are really good at government contracting. They've built their company around government contracting, the kind like Booz Allen, Northrop, those kinds of companies. They're best suited for this because they can forecast out, they can think 5 years ahead and jump on IDIQs, and they can outlast these long sales cycles. But these are not, startups can't do that. Startups maybe were just created 6 months ago, and the next IDIQ on-ramp will be 4 years from now. That's way too long for them to be thinking for this. So the options for small business are narrow. They have to go find the IDIQ holders, say, okay, you have access to that IDIQ. I'm going to partner with you. And usually, they come on as a subcontractor, and they're usually forced to take pretty low margins because the prime contractor will tell them, you've got to keep your rates low. I'm trying to compete with these other primes. And so there's a big brother effect there where the subcontractor is usually not making any money on these deals, but all they're trying to do is build up that past performance. And unfortunately, that's the way of traditional contracting. Is if you want to do business with CyberOffice, you've got to go find those IDIQ holders, buddy up with them, take terrible margins for the next couple of years, build up that past performance, and then try to jump on the IDIQ the next time it's open and you compete for it as a prime. Well, that's a problem. So even purchases through IDIQs take 6 to 9 months. So a little bit faster, but not fast enough for startups. So Air Force, Army recognized this. They created other acquisition vehicles like OTAs, CSOs, BAAs. These are more your rapid acquisition type vehicles. Not much of the budget goes out on those. Definitely less than 10% of the budget, because a lot of contracting officers, program managers see these as experiments. They're putting these out on OTAs. They're going to see what kind of technology comes back in, but they're just really not, they're kind of gambling that in their minds, that technology is going to come in through one of these. And even still with these rapid acquisition vehicles like an OTA, if I choose that as my acquisition path, say I've got this requirement, I'm going to send it to Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, they're going to put it out on an OTA. I'm still waiting 3 to 6 months from the time that requirement is created to the time I have a contract. And it's going to be very small budgets are coming out there. So SBIR advisors, we're, former acquisition guys, we're looking at this process and seeing these are the 3 options that most contracting officers go to. They just default to, if I've got a requirement, I've got money, I'm going to take it through one of these 3 vehicles. How do we break into this, and how do we help startups break into this and get their technology to the warfighter? And that's where we entered the sole source direct sale process. So a sole source contract is something that every contracting officer has experience doing, but they don't do it very often. It's usually less than 10% of the budget, but it is usually a lot faster contract. And most times when a contracting officer is doing sole source, they're doing it for reasons like national security, or there's only one energy provider in town, so I've got to go to that one guy to provide power to the base. So there's reasons to go sole source. And they do it, everyone has experience doing it, but not very often. But this is where we wanted to play. We want to do direct sales. So how are we doing that? We're leveraging the SBIR program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, to disrupt the way the DoD currently does business. So when you go and you win a SBIR phase 1, phase 2, you inherit sole source justification for that solution. Every federal agency, if you've won a SBIR phase 1, every federal agency is mandated by statute that they have to go sole source to you if they have a requirement that matches your solution. If they don't, they've got to write a letter to the SBA explaining why they couldn't award a contract to this small business. Sometimes there's good reasons, like you're in jail or the company's out of business or something like that. But for the most part, contracting officers prefer this method because it, for one, is much faster, speeds up their acquisition timeline, and 2, they don't like writing letters to the SBA. So coming to a contracting officer with a sole source justification is considered a really good thing. And there's programs like out there that can help you do this, like the 8A program. If you go and join the Small Business Administration's 8A, you get a sole source justification for a little while. They team you up with a mentor, you become a protege company, and you get that sole source justification for a period of time or a dollar limit, a ceiling. So like, for example, I could go to Alaskan Native, I could go sole source if the company is owned by Alaskan Native, but only up to 20 million. After 20 million, that's not sole sourceable anymore. So why we're going after the SBIR program, we're pushing all of our companies that way, is for one, it gives that sole source justification at the product level. That's at the solution level, not the company. So that's important. So not only is that sole source justification, have no dollar limit. So you could do, there's recently been a phase 3. If you go Google BlueStack, look up BlueStack, you'll see that they just got a $380 million sole source phase 3 contract. There's no upper limit on a phase 3 sole source, and there's no expiration. So unlike 8A, where you graduate the program in 5 years, there's no expiration on a phase 3 sole source. And the other thing is, it's like I said, at the product level. What that means is I can sell that product sole source through a reseller. So for our commercial first companies that don't really want to play in defense, they want to go through resellers, we're able to get them a SBIR contract, get that sole source ability, and then extend that sole source justification to whoever reseller they're working with. So even if their company is bought or they graduate, they become a large business, they get over that 500 employee threshold, that product still has phase 3 sole source ability. So it's a really powerful tool, and we're using it to go do direct sales with the government and kind of circumvent all 3 of these other vehicles by going direct to the program offices and contracting shops. The second reason you want to go SBIR is because what I mentioned earlier is a lot of these program offices forecast out their budgets by 2 years. So if you weren't on their radar 2 years ago, they don't have money for you today. Everything's already tied up. So when you meet a customer and they're like, I like this solution, but sorry, I don't have any money. SBIR allows us to say, well, that's fine. Sign this MOU and we'll go get other people's money. We'll go get SBIR funds to pay for this project under a phase 2 contract. So there's direct to phase 2s every couple of months, or you can win phase 1s and go phase 1 to phase 2. So as long as you're playing in the SBIR space, you're applying to phase 1s and direct to phase 2s, you always have somewhere to take an MOU. And what is an MOU? It's a ticket for free money. At least that's how you should pitch it to your customers. If you're talking to a customer in uniform, they like your solution, but they don't have money, say sign this MOU, it's a ticket to go get free other people's money, $750K of phase 2 dollars. So that allows you to start to bridge the gap between today and 2 years from now when they do have money for you. In the meantime, you're going to use phase 2 dollars to work with them. So that's the second reason. The third reason we want to go take our companies to SBIR is because you can come in as a prime. There's no past performance required. So unlike a lot of these other contracts that I have up here that might require past performance, you have to show that kind of positive Yelp review, government Yelp review, to show that you've been a subcontractor for a little while, done really well before you broke out as a prime. SBIR allows you to go direct off the street, become a prime on a contract. So that's why we do it there. And then it's also favorable IP and data rights. So let's say under the CSO or BAA, that they're funded with R&D dollars. Well, if the DoD pays to develop something, typically they want to own that thing. So that IP rights is going to go to whoever funded the project. Under SBIR, it doesn't matter. It's an economic stimulus program. So it doesn't matter if it's a DoD's expense or at your expense. Whatever's created during that SBIR contract is yours to keep. That's your IP, your data rights for 20 years after the contract. So that's another reason why we favor the SBIR program. And that's how we're using it to go after and kind of disrupt the way things are going now. Is that we're skipping all of we're going around the incumbents, the large companies that hold these IDIQs that are getting 90% of the money. We're going around them and we're going direct to the program office and letting them know we have this sole source justification and really good innovative technology, and they should just do business with just us. And so hopefully if we do enough of that over time, the IDIQs will become underutilized and they'll just start to find more and more SBIR companies to go direct to, because it's commercial technology. It's way faster. A lot of times it's other people's money, and it's innovative technology. So where a lot of the primes are failing and where we're, slow in innovating is because these slow acquisition processes is part of it. But the other part of it is because a lot of the prime contractors like Boeing and Raytheon and others, not to, throw them under the bus, but they're a little bit slow when it comes to innovation. They're not as fast as a startup. And so that's where we're thinking here. And then, so like I said earlier, we make investments in companies with dual use technology. So the VC funds we work with, most of them invest solely or exclusively in dual use, meaning you're looking at government as a potential customer. Some of them only invest in veteran-owned startups, and so we work with those companies to help get their portfolio into the government business, and then we use this process to build that funnel, that pipeline. So we're going after, of course, let me back up here. We're going after all the open competition stuff. We're going after OTAs and BAs, but we're also going after SBIR and sole source direct sale, and that together makes up the pipeline that we build inside the DoD for these companies, which requires a lot of business development. But anyway, back to VC, the venture capital companies are making investments. If you can show that you've got this figured out, that this is your path, you're not just coming to a VC and saying, I'm going to apply to this AppWorks thing. I heard it was cool. And you have no plan to take it from phase 1 to phase 2 or how to transition at phase 2 to phase 3. VCs are getting smart and they want to know, what is your transition path to becoming a program of record? How are you viewing the DoD market? And these are the kinds of things that they like to hear of here's our approach. And here's our pipeline. And you can start to fill it out with dollar amounts. Here's the quantity of contracts we're going after. Here's our success rate that we're projecting, and then build that pipeline so they can see the way you're thinking about this market and that you've thought all the way through the process. So we're helping startups do that. And most VCs look at what is your revenue. So they're looking at when they see revenue, they're thinking about annual or month over month. They want recurring revenue because that's kind of how they meet their metrics to get to the next round. So if you come to them and you say, I've got a SBIR phase 1 or phase 2, and you're counting that as revenue, you're going to be laughed out of the room. You need to count that as non-dilutive funding or grant money or something like that, R&D funding. Don't ever tell them that a phase 2 or phase 1 is revenue, because they know it's not. But if you can start to show the path of how are we using these grants, these non-dilutive funding to get to recurring sales, then that's when you can perk their ears. And so back to this page. So how are we helping these companies get to recurring sales? Those phase 3 contracts or phase 2s are typically 1 year period performance, but phase 3s can be up to 5 years period performance. So if we're pushing a government first partner, a lot of what we're doing is we're doing a phase 3 that is licensing as a kind of a other direct cost. So it's maybe 10 to 20% of the actual contract is solution. And then the other 80% is services. So we're coming in and we're helping, provide bodies to help integrate this solution. And the reason we do that is because defense customer is often so busy, has so many missions, so much going on, that even when they buy things, they don't have time to really make sure that new purchase is integrated in their daily mission. And if you're not careful, they'll just put it on a shelf and won't use it. It'll gather dust. So part of this is selling licenses, but it's also coming in and helping them use it and see how this helps me with my mission day to day. And they don't, also say, like, we can come in and help you get out of your own way a little bit, and you focus on program management of your current program, and we'll just integrate this for you, and you don't have to do anything. Like, we're kind of a turnkey solution. You award the contract, and next thing you know, we're in here and we're helping you work with this technology. That's perfect. That's what they're thinking about. Now, for commercial first, they just want to see licenses sales. They only want to see a purchase, and it might be smaller phase 3, but they want to see a purchase and they want to see it annual recurring. So for them, we'll do no services, but we'll do, maybe 200, 500K worth of licenses but we'll put option years on there for every year for 5 years. Now it is a recurring purchase for every 5 years. Now, the good thing is once we get in there with one sale, whether it's a phase 2 or phase 3, we're starting to show that customer what their life is like with this new technology and kind of getting them hooked on that so we can keep coming back for more sales when phase 3s and TAC 5s, Strat 5s, things like that. I know I've talked a lot. I'm probably getting a little off base from what we started. So with the 20 minutes or so we have left, I want to kick it over for questions. And I'll come back to this slide. So just, wrapping up. These are some consultants that can help you with this process that are working with venture capital like us, who kind of can help you build your defense business. So obviously we're Cyber Advisors Inc. There's another New Core Strategies out there as a great option, and then Victoria Falls Technology is in the same space, doing the same sorts of things, working with different VCs. If you've ever heard of Incutel, a lot of Incutel venture capital firms like Sequoia and others are working with those other two companies, and then we're working with some of the lesser known national security VCs. Turbo SBIR, sorry, Rick, 1 second. So consultants, can be kind of pricey sometimes. So if you're new to all this, you're just trying to get your feet.
I gotta listen to this. I really do.
Okay, if you're just trying to dip into and try to see if you can win Cyber and kind of dip your toe in the water, and then before you invest, I would maybe push you towards some proposal software like Turbo SBIR. They're a much more affordable option, and they're kind of like TurboTax, but for Cyber contracts and Cyber proposals. They're a great company, and they're do it yourself. So you're not going to have a consultant come in and do everything for you, but they do have really awesome software that can walk you through the process. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Okay, do we have any questions out there from anyone?
I had a question, just kind of, okay, first I want to comment. Thank you so much for this presentation. That was really great, very inclusive. That is a lot of information, and I took really great notes, so thank you. And then I wanted to also ask, so if you have a project that is going to be a much larger, it might even be bigger than, $750,000 to get a running real prototype, how do you really compete with the other big primes and stuff like that as a small startup?
Yeah, so that's going to really change your strategy of what kind of vehicle you're looking to come in on. So and just kind of understanding what are one of my favorite movies is War Dogs for various reasons, but one favorite quote in there is he says, "You make all your money reading between the lines," and that's kind of where you have to do in these Cyber and CIDR programs. Is you're reading between the lines, see what is the actual motive of the agency behind it. So let's look at Air Force. Air Force's motive in their CIDR program is to get commercial technologies. These are things that are already being bought and scaled on the commercial side into the DoD. And so they're looking for you to say, I've got customers, I have revenue, I have investment around this product, and I just need to make some adaptations to scale this within DoD. They're not looking for TRL 5 or lower, technology readiness level 5 or lower. They're looking at other things, and we can get more into AFWERX motivations later. But there's other programs like STTR, the Small Business Technology Transfer, that is looking at earlier stage technology, TRL 5 or lower, and that might be a better suit or fit for you. Or there's other agencies like National Science Fund and NASA and things like those that do fund earlier stage, more like R&D type work. And I'll finish that off by saying that a phase 2 is a limited time, limited budget scope. They're not expecting you to deliver product at the back end of this. They're expecting the only thing that you are required to do to, meet your contractual obligations of a phase two is turn in a final report at the end that says, here's how far I got with 750,000 in 12 months. And it may not be a product. It's, it may be just getting down. I work with a lot of companies that do satellites. $750,000 doesn't pay for the gas to get the satellite launched. And so what we have to show is this is how far we got with 750K and the time you gave us. And then that's what, they have SBIR rounds every 3 months for. So you can come back in and say, okay, the first phase two was to get me down mile 1 of my product development roadmap. Now I need, a second SBIR to get me down mile 2 of my product development roadmap, and so on. So you can just, you can keep coming back to that trough for your development.
That's a really great clarification. I didn't know that. So thank you. That's very helpful.
Awesome.
So Sam, I want to follow up with Kit's question. So with the 750 example that you gave, and they come back for additional funding, how many times can they come back, or when do they need to start looking at another way of getting where they need to go with their funding?
Sure. So with phase ones, phase twos, you don't start to hit the point where you have to start reporting until 15 awards. So you can come back and get 15 phase twos before you have to start saying, here's how many of these have transitioned to phase three. So basically from 0 to 15, you're not graded any differently for saying you have passed phase twos. Once you hit that 15 mark, if you're not able to say I have, if you say I have 0 phase threes, then it's going to count against you in the evaluation. It's not a debarment. You can keep, applying, but they're basically going to knock your score a little bit because you're coming back for more and more phase twos, and they want to see you, hey, okay, you've had 15 of these. You need to get to phase three or find another way to fund it. So that's kind of where it starts to impact you, is at 15 or more. But I will say they're very sensitive to essentially equivalent work. So you have to be very specific when you're coming in and you're applying over and over again. What is different about the scope of this phase two versus the scope of phase two I just had? And so you're saying this is a different customer, it's a different use case, it's a different product development item on my roadmap. I'm developing this feature over here. What is different about the scope of phase two, before and the new phase twos? That's very important, because otherwise they don't want to pay for the same thing twice, or seem to pay for the same thing twice. So that's when you're coming into this. If your first phase two win is very generic, you're gonna struggle on future phase twos, because you weren't super specific on what the first one was, and now you're gonna have a hard time differentiating the next phase two scope from the first one. So you have to be very clear and concise what you're trying to accomplish, and typically that leads to a higher probability of win anyway, if you've got a very clear message of what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so I want to know, who is we or they? Whenever you say they're very sensitive, you're talking about customers. I think some of the folks here are not sure who we're talking about in that regard.
Gotcha. All right, so when I say they, I'm talking about the SBIR program offices. So every agency has an SBIR STTR program office. For Air Force, that's AFWERX. Okay, and AFWERX even is just the evaluation arm. Then there's another group behind them that does the actual contracting. That's Air Force Research Labs. And so that's very different from your customer. And sometimes you're talking to two different groups. So if you're Air Force example, because they're one of the only groups that does an open topic, they're asking you to go find a customer and bring them to the party. So your customer might say, I want commercial version of your technology today. I don't care what R&D you're doing. Well, if you go back to AFWERX and you propose, hey, here, this customer just wants my commercial technology. Here's a proposal for licenses. They're going to strike that and say, nope, that's not R&D. So you have to kind of, understand what audiences you're talking to. So I'm glad you asked that question, Alan. Is if I'm talking to my Air Force customer, actual program office, end user, trigger puller, and they want my technology today, I'm going to have to message to them appropriately and say, okay, yep, you'll get some technology to use and try out and give me feedback on, but there has to be R&D that we're doing. And here are the milestones that we'll be doing in the background to make sure that R&D is being done. When they understand that, like, okay, I'm getting the product and you're tweaking it, cool, they'll sign the MOU. Now you take it to AFWorks and you say, AFWorks, we're proposing an R&D project with this group. We're going to provide them some technology to do some feasibility study with, but we're going to mostly be doing R&D. Now you're checking their box of, okay, you're appropriately using R&D funding, SBIR dollars, and now you're kind of getting through both gatekeepers, if that makes sense. But other agencies, not Air Force, are going to tell you specifically what they want. They don't have open topics, so they have a very specific problem statement, and in that case, they're bringing the customer. So it's almost one and the same, because they're telling you who the customer is going to be, they're telling you what the problem is, and you're going to work directly with them. So there's not really that differentiation. It's just AFWorks that has that kind of funky two masters sort of thing.
So what happened to those? I've heard that there are those that won awards but were not funded and timed out during COVID. I mean, I guess we're still in COVID, if you will. But for those that have timed out, if they won an award, but now they've continued to work on their technology and they have a product and they have a customer, can they go sole source?
Yeah, so let me unpack that a little bit. So they just started sending out select unfunded letters as of, like, I think 19.3 was their first round. They started doing that. And basically how it's been described to me is they have, 400 or some proposals they're looking at. The evaluators say these are all selectable. The proposals are great. There are no problems there. They're all outstanding, but they run out of funding. So just if you fall just below that cut line of where the money is, then you might have received a select unfunded letter, which means your proposal was great, outstanding. If you can find somebody to fund it, we will, but try again next round. Maybe you get above the cut line. That it's essentially a soft no from AFWorks. But it has this neat little tool that says we'll leave it open for 180 days. That if you do find a customer that says, nah, never mind, I don't need SBIR funds, I want this solution, and they're willing to fund it, they can MIPR money to AFWorks. AFWorks will put it on the contract, and you'll get the award, the signed award. We've done that a number of times with Navy funds, DARPA funds, and Air Force funds for companies that were select unfunded. And then we were able to get them to a contract. But that 180-day clock is pretty tight. If you're no longer eligible for that, 180 days is over, then your options are to come back in through another phase 1 or direct to phase 2. And then to answer the second part of your question, Alan, are you sole sourceable if you were select unfunded? So if you had a phase 1 win, then you are sole sourceable. So if you've got a contract award, signed contract that says phase 1, then you're eligible for phase 3 right away. You don't have to go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Now, if you didn't do a phase 1 and you came in direct to phase 2, and that's when you got your select unfunded, you don't have sole source yet until you have that signed contract, because anytime you go to phase 3, they're going to ask you what was your funding agreement number, and what they're asking for is what was your contract number. And all you have is a letter that says you're select unfunded. There's no contract number on there. So until that contract is signed, you don't have sole source ability. So
to clarify then, if someone has a funding agreement number, then they're sole sourceable then.
Yep. If they have a contract award number, from a phase 1 or phase 2, they are sole sourceable.
Okay. All right. Who else wants to ask questions? I've got while you're waiting to unmute yourself, if someone's looking or thinking, another question for you then, Sam. What if someone has won a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they've not commercialized yet, but they've gone back to their product and they think they may have someone that would be interested? Is is there value in looking, or well, first of all, is there a timeout? Is there a period where their sole source ability goes away?
No, so your sole source ability is for the life of that product or that solution that you've won the contract for. And so it doesn't go away no matter if you become a large business, if you sell the company, you sell the product through somebody else, you're always going to have that sole source ability as long as you have won that contract for the life of that product or that solution. So it's a really, really powerful tool for that reason. And that's why we have companies like CloudBees and some of the other large companies we had on the slide who are trying to come in through SBIR, because it's a very powerful tool if they can get it.
So if you haven't commercialized, but you have an SBIR, is how do we help our clients? Wow, sorry, a little bit of an earthquake there. It just freaks me out a little. If someone has an SBIR but they've not commercialized, is there potential in what I'd call shopping their SBIR technology?
Okay, so I think what you're saying is they have a lower TRL technology, but they've won, say, a phase 1 for it. Is there a potential to shop it with like an integrator or other commercial partner?
Sure.
That's interesting. I'd say yes. It's going to depend, of course, case by case, but that sole source ability is very attractive. So I've been known to take, I've taken companies to Microsoft and said, hey, this company has a sole source ability. And they said, great, we'll come under as a subcontract to you, and we will award the prime contract sole source to you. And then, even though they're getting 1% of the contract, the other 99% is Microsoft. That's how they're leveraging that sole source ability.
Okay. So how do you look at that to see if there's value or spending time in, how do you analyze or assess that technology or that award for potential?
Okay, for potential investment or to work with them to get to phase, or both?
Both. Commercial viability. I'll just kind of put it under that. So to your point of the example with Microsoft, or that you can find a customer.
Yeah, so venture capital is not a lot different than AFWorks in that they a lot of times are not complete experts in the technology. They will always do due diligence, and they'll bring in smart people to review the technology, but they themselves, think of it like Shark Tank. When you come in to be watching an episode of Shark Tank, they come in, they pitch the product. The sharks probably have never, or they haven't cleaned dishes or something in a long time. How do they know this scrub brush is going to be good? They say, what are your sales? What are your numbers? So from a venture capital standpoint, they're always looking at, do you have traction? Do you have commercialization? And that's how they're judging the investability of the company. And frankly, that's how they're just judging the technical merit of because if it was really technically, high merit, then someone would be buying it, right? It's kind of their thought process. There are a number of venture capital groups that they're called, they call themselves technology capital. So they will take technology that has like a SBIR award, and they'll say, okay, you've been validated by smart people at, DARPA or at AFRL, and they've given you a contract, but you're having trouble commercializing that. But that technology itself is worth something. It's capital. They will take that and usually go and sell the technology itself to some company where that tech would become a differentiator. It would be disruptive for that. Example would be, Alan, I'll send you their website. I can't remember their TCP. I'll have to find their link, but basically what they do is they'll help, like they took a battery company that these guys made made a battery. They won a SIB reward, but they just could not get it off the ground, and they were looking at shuttering the doors. Great technology funded by grant money like this, but they just couldn't get commercialization or investment. So this VC came in and said, we think this would be game changing for these larger middle tier businesses over here that are in a very tough competing market. So they will take that capital and they'll actually that technology capital, and they will use that as investment in the mid-tier company. So in lieu of putting money into that company, they offer the technology patents and things as in exchange for equity in the company, because that technology will probably net a lot higher return than just here's cash.
Does that require, from a legal perspective, does the individual sell the company, therefore the SBIR rights goes with the company, or do they sell the technology product and the rights go with that way?
It's often they buy the company, but it can be they can just split off the patents and things. But usually it's the patents and and the product in that case is the company, and so they just buy the whole thing. But if it makes sense to just split off the product, they can just take the solution and patents or whatever there is around that, the IP, and use that.
Okay, Sam, I have a question. Of the 13 or 14 other agencies that have SBIR programs, do you work with any of those? Are you familiar with, because they've all got to be slightly different. The rules might be the same, but they operate a little bit different. Do you work with that at all?
So we work with NASA and DoD primarily. DoD is our sweet spot. That's where we all come from. We've certainly won NSF and DOE before. It doesn't really work for our model because NSF, will take a year to award a contract. So by the time we, find out we've won it, we've usually forgot we proposed to it. But that's not necessarily our model. We try to stay in DoD and NASA as our sweet spots. Yeah. A couple of the companies I mentioned earlier, like Turbo SBIR, their sweet spot is NSF, NIH, those kinds of agencies. And there's usually, no one can be an expert in everything, but usually you can find that companies that are experts in a particular area. We do well in DoD because we kind of understand, like you asked earlier, what is their motivation? Like AFWERX has 3 motivations. Number one is they've got to spend their money every year. They've got to burn it all because Congress told them they have to. But number 2, very high, close second, is they want to get things that airmen actually want. They want to buy technology that'll help the warfighter. And so that's why they put such a high priority on proposals that have letters, stacks of letters of support. They have money on MOUs. All those things are demand signals that say the airmen really want this. So that's number 2. The third mission is to domesticate technology. Going back to what I said at the very beginning, is we're in a bit of a Cold War, and Russia and China are making investments in technology companies in the United States. They're actively offering very good term sheets, 100,000 here, 100,000 there for great terms. But and they're not doing anything nefarious, but as soon as a company takes one of those term sheets, they're debarred from doing business with DoD. And so there's this, they're locking out the Defense Department from a lot of innovative tech, and Air Force is trying to reverse that trend. And so the reason they're branding themselves as AF Ventures, AFWERX, those sorts of things, they're trying to keep companies domestic and looking at American capital resources. So they've just created a trusted capital network. They're trying to activate American VC. So if you come to AFWERX and you have a letter of support from a venture capital firm, your proposal just went up that much more on them because you're checking that third mission for them, that box for them.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Any other questions out there?
I do have one. And so I just looked at the website for SBIR Advisors Inc. And so there's a place where you can just simply enter your name, and they say someone will reach out to you. Is that the simplest way to start a conversation with him?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I have to, we have to go back and check. I know that we're not the best at answering those that come in through the website, but if you want to reach me directly, I'm sam@sbiradvisors.com.
Thank you. Love to do that.
Okay, anybody else out there? Okay, well, I guess that ends that then. And Sam, this is a great talk. I really appreciate all your effort, and this really was an A+ in my book. So thank you very much. Alan, do you have any other final parting comments?
So I want to dovetail what you just said, Rick. I totally agree. I think what we have here, Sam, is a lot of, for several people that have, and some that aren't on today that I know that have won SBIRs and some that have fought for them, some really valuable information here. I'm going to try to follow up with some of them, and I want to get with you and talk to you and them. It would be interesting to see if we went back and pulled up our SBIR awardees over the last 5-10 years, if there would be a follow-up. It might not be a lunch and learn for a general topic, but a follow-up webinar specifically for SBIR awardees. I'd like to try that. It'd be interesting to see what we could do with that. I think there's some very valuable information here. And for those on, if you reach out to Sam or any of these others that he's referred you to in this process, we'd love to hear from you and see how things are going. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Sam, you really opened my eyes to some things that I was not aware of. I think one was the slide, and we are, as we move forward, we're going to start getting these slides out to everyone. Vicky's back, and she's been a great part of assisting us. And for my sanity, I needed Vicky desperately. And Vicky, so thank you for being here. You help a lot. So if all of you haven't, give her a big round of applause and welcoming her back.
It's
very
good
much
to be
appreciate
back.
you.
I'd much rather be doing this.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. We need you, very much so. But we'll pass that information out to you. And like I said, looking forward to the follow-up. We're going to reach out to our awardees and see if we can have a conversation and pull up the webinar sometime in the next month or two, if that'll work for you. Cool. All right. I think that's it. You're open to chat if anybody has anything else you'd like to ask or talk about. Otherwise, we're finished for the day. So any thoughts, any comments?
Sam, I just had a kind of a question. I work with Alan, and I work with a lot of companies that are trying to get into the SBIR program. And I was just wondering, based on what you said, do you think that the AFWorks, like the open topics, pretty much need to be at a TRL 5 or so to get funded, or is open topics different than their normal solicitations? What part of AFWorks is more the TRL 5 and above, I guess, of the Air Force SBIR in general?
Sure. So yes, for AFWorks, SBIR, I'd say TRL 5 and above is preferred. You're below 5, you need to be applying to the STTR, Air Force STTR program. What we see, and this is data over, the 150 or so that we've brought through the program. We currently have 55 companies on phase 1 right now through the 21.1 round. The average revenue for companies that are coming in through the open topic SBIR are $500,000 or above. And the average investment is $1 million or above. So we're looking at, seed Series A companies are kind of the sweet spot for AFRL AFWERX, open topic, SBIR side. If you're under those metrics, you can still win. This is certainly a bell curve, and I'm just talking about averages, but it's more difficult. We can say with pretty high surety that, you know, if you're over those two metrics, you're going to do just fine in phase one. But if you're beneath those, you need to take a good look at STTR. STTR is a very similar program, $50,000 phase one, 90 days, $750,000 phase two for 1 year. The only difference between the SBIR and SITR program is that you have to partner with a nonprofit, like a research institute, an FFRDC, a university, and that's how they're validating your technology. So if you come to them with a TRL, 4 or 5 or 3 or something, they need to see that, okay, you don't have commercial traction yet, understood, you're a little earlier stage. So how do non-experts validate your technology? Well, they look at who's your nonprofit partner. You're coming in with an MIT, they know, okay, this is pretty credible. If you come in with, community college, you're going to need a lot of letters of support from some engineers or, scientists on the Air Force side that say this is good technology to help you build that credibility story. Does that make sense?
Okay. And the other thing, I just had this conversation yesterday. I also help out at a makerspace that's associated with Wichita State. Which is nonprofit. Is there a way that a makerspace with some really good technical capabilities in fabrication, figuring out how to build stuff, could that be included as a nonprofit on an STTR?
Through the open topic, yes. So the open topic is a little bit different than your normal STTR. Normal STTR is university comes up with the IP, they partner with small business to commercialize. Through the open topic, it's the other way around. The small business has the IP, they have to partner with a nonprofit to be eligible for STTR. So AFWERX recognizes that and they say, okay, well, what the nonprofit can bring to the table is commercialization, help with commercialization. So that's opened the door for education, entrepreneurship centers like co-working spaces, makerspace, accelerators, incubators are taking part in this program now, because what they bring to the fight is they say, okay, company has the IP, accelerator has the ability to match you with commercialization partners. Maybe it's Air Force customers, maybe it's VC, maybe it's commercial customers. So that's how they're looking at that. So I know Catalyst Campus out in Colorado Springs has been successful at this, winning STTRs with companies under the Open Topic STTR program. Here in Texas, we have National Security Collaboration Center. It's another kind of makerspace, nonprofit that has done well through this program. So yeah, it's certainly possible.
Okay, thank you.
What was the last one, the last example you gave, Sam? The one in Texas?
National Security Collaboration Center. So Bijou will know who they are. They share campus with UTSA.
Gotcha. Very good. Good question, Bill. You do know you were in overtime.
Yeah, I know.
Can't let you forget that.
Yeah.
All right. I
very-
appreciate the ones that are here today.
Mhm. It's been very insightful, Sam. I appreciate it. And I've been working with the SBIR program since about 1998, and I learned stuff today that I didn't know.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I really enjoyed working with you guys and around the program, and thank you so much for having me to talk today. I hope it was value add. I know it was. I could be sponsored by a coffee maker, because I know I was talking pretty fast, but hopefully we can slow the recording down and maybe hear what I was saying sometimes. But I appreciate your all's time, and thank you so much for having me.
Now, Sam,
Okay.
where are you located? What town? What you said, Texas?
I'm in Bernie, Texas, so just a little northwest of San Antonio, a little southwest of Austin.
Right in the edge of hill country, huh?
Yep, yep. I'm in George Strait's territory.
There you go. There you go. Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts. Rick, I'm glad you brought him on. I agree with Bill. This was some good value information.
Okay.
We'll continue to be reaching out to you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Sam. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Looking forward to next time, and I'll let you all go. But if you ever need to ask me anything, I'm Sam at SBIRadvisors.com. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.